Hey there, it's Polly McGee from Pilot, joined by my always co-pilot.
Hello, I'm Zoe.
We're unpacking. For those of you who have just joined us on the Unpacked journey, it's where we like to spaff off about the things that we are being made curious about. Something that's come up for us in facilitation, or we've been talked to by one of our separate clients, or we've just had a conversation about together. And we felt it was just a nice thing to start having conversations about those big questions in life. But if you have just discovered this absolute pure stream of genius, you can find many, many other conversations like this on our website, www.partlife.co. That's out of the way. Let's talk about today's subject, which I've asked Zoe if we can do this episode on belonging, because I have to ask her permission for things, and B, because it's really just the thing that's been most present for me this week in conversations that I've had, and also I'm thinking about myself and what it is to belong. What does that mean, and what does that ask of me and the people around me? And so whatever's coming up for me, I know is coming up for everyone else in a universal sense. So today we unpack belonging. Zoe, tell me what your relationship with belonging is.
I love that you suggested this idea. I love it because I think it's fundamental to being a human being. And we see this over and over again in our facilitation rooms. People longing for belonging and people bashing themselves out of shape to feel a sense of belonging. So I think about it in three ways it's affecting me in the most primary sense at the moment. In our rooms, I observe it, and it fills me full of empathy and tenderness, where I see how universal it is. And then also thinking about it personally and how it's changed for me. So now it's really belonging to self. And I'm going to love hearing you talk about that, because I know you're going to really expand that. And I think that'll be foundational.
I won't.
No, you won't. No, you won't. I will force you.
I won't do it.
So belonging to self, but then through belonging to self, that I can truly belong to the community that I love and that loves me. So that sense of not being alone and feeling seen and met and supported. And now having friendships that are so, I mean, this is something else we should talk about when we talk about aging. The honoring of living through different seasons of friendships. Like, you know, all my weaknesses, you know, all the worst about me. And look, you're still here. I mean, there's something so gorgeous about that and so wild. So that sense of true belonging. And then that dovetails into the last one, which is being a mother of four and of four ages of children, different genders, 13, 11, 8, and 3, and watching how this need for belonging is so buried into our DNA, and watching how their different personalities and potentially birth orders affect what they do for belonging. And my eldest, she assimilates. The second one, she doesn't assimilate. It's really interesting. She's less interested in what other people are doing or thinking or feeling. So belonging isn't the masses for her. It's two or three really close up people. My little chap, he's a hardcore extrovert, and he literally used to say quite regularly, I love everybody on earth. So it's so interesting to watch that. And then also just to think about belonging in a work sense as belonging in our private life. And you and I talk about this a lot, that the integrated self, like what is that we do? And certainly in my teens, and I was miserable at school, and I was bullied, and I was alone. It was either to belong, I was going to need to not be myself. So I chose to self-isolate. And then arriving at university and finding tribe and feeling belonging for the first time outside my family and outside films and art was a miracle. And the world became technicolored because I'm all about connection. So that's enough yabbering for me. Tell me about you with belonging.
I'm just processing all of that, because I think there's so many golden bits in there, but I really resonate with that sense of, you know, probably where I'm at now is the understanding that I need to belong to myself. Is it Maya Angelous that made that beautiful quote that when you belong nowhere, you belong everywhere? Which I really love that. I really hold that a lot, because I think about, I'm working through patterns of seeing my desperate need for belonging that came from childhood. So I really identify with the struggles of both of your daughters, because I so feel the struggle of your eldest one, and that age when you're in year 7 and you're, 6 and 7 and you're going into school, and the peer group is everything, and to be shunned by that or to not feel you fit in, and what you'll do to bend out of shape. I mean, peer pressure, that's what it is. Peer pressure is a cry for belonging. But Eckhart Tolle talks about belonging being the primordial need, and the first place of belonging is with our parents, and we have an expectation that we will belong with them, but we don't always belong. We don't always fit in, and we aren't always seen for our unique selves. We're seen as the projection of what they want from their precious child that's just been born, and there's conditions that come with that. And I think that he says that we have a lot of struggle and we have a lot of pain because they're seeing the child they want, and then we're seeing the essence of who we are, looking to be seen. And I think we look to our parents and then we look to friends, and I think there's this definite 2 epochs of that. And one is in very early childhood when you're a toddler and you're just trying to work out what it is to be you, your name, a separate differentiated ego self. And then there's that 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old patch, which is so horrific and painful, where you're trying to work out all of the things and you've got all the emotions and stuff. So I'm sort of feeling that. And what's been interesting for me is how I've been seeing that experience of my childhood and my high school life, which felt a lot like yours in some ways, seeing that sort of activated in me in different things I've been doing in groups as an adult, and really having to stop and go, that feeling isn't what's actually happening here, but this sense of like, how do I belong? How do I fit in? How do I feel like I'm encapsulated? Which is great because I've got the Maya Angelous quote in my mind that just makes me think, I have to belong in my authenticity, because anytime I'm trying to arrange my personality or my look or my being so people like me, then I'm just putting on armor, as against if they like me, I want those people that like me to like me, not. So yeah, look, it's really interesting. But I think the legacy of what we carry with us from our childhood and from our teenage years, which is why it's so painful to watch as a parent, I think, from you, and I feel it as a godmother with your guys, because I just know that pain, and I know there's nothing that we can do except stand by and be full of love.
So true. I love what you touched on there, that idea of, you referred to it as armor, and also, and I think of it too as the performative self.
Yeah, totally.
Like if I do this, will you love me? If I do this, will I fit in? And that idea of fitting in being so primary, particularly in our teens. My eldest said the other day, we were talking about a scenario that came up, and that's a long-winded story, we don't need to get in that, but I'd suggested a mode of behavior for her, what she could say in that situation. And she said, they would tear me limb from limb. And I said, tear you limb from limb, your friends? And she said, it would be suicide. And I was so struck by, I had to actually not go, that would have been an empathy miss, because her 13-year-old brain and her disposition and her birth order and her gender and all her privilege and everything else is coming together to tell her that that's the truth of it.
But this is like, Zoe, like it shocks me so much to think that we do this our whole lives. Like we begin there and we begin before then with those moments of saying, I'm taking a signal that who I am is not enough. It's no surprise that we're in this epidemic of not enough, because we're being shown, or we're imprinting that we're not enough from such an early age. And how can we find our way back then to that holy grail of that we're divine beings, that we are whole and perfect in ourselves in every way, in every moment? It's just it's such a long climb back from however many decades of going, not enough, I should be like this. And this is what I think we see so much in facilitating leadership work, where people are looking to discover their heart-centered leaders, but they're grappling with the performative leader that they've been, because this is what I think a leader looks like. This is how a leader does this. This is how a female leader particularly does this. And it's really confusing. Imagine how confused our inner worlds are. It's just nuts.
Totally. And we had a client last year who told me that it was really interesting. She told me about that, because when we were talking about this idea of who first told you that you weren't enough, when did you first receive that information? And she could pinpoint it to a moment when she used to sit on her front stoop and sing to the boys that were going back and forth to school. And I love that image, this little sort of 3-year-old, 4-year-old girl. And she was just singing. She loved to sing. She was spreading the love and the bonhomie. And then her mum came out and gave her incredibly mixed messaging, because they all loved this little performer, but they were embarrassed by it being too much. So she got shamed. It was, stop that. Don't do that. Come inside. And that's the first time she remembered that idea of, when I'm free and I'm sparkly and I'm shiny, I'm too much. And so who she is now as a woman, she's approaching 60, and particularly in a work setting, is she's had this mask on, cauterized herself, made herself smaller so that she's more palatable. What a tragedy. And when she shared that with me, she wept. She wept, that little girl, and she wept that she believed that message.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing, that, you know, our parents are such interesting influences, and, you know, we've got a whole video in the series on family, and you know, we have people work with us who are suffering like we are. So they bring a child into the world, and then we all inherit the lineage of what that looks like, what that family lineage is of shame and of suffering and of the things that they've been conditioned by. And I think about, you know, in our family, and my mum was very similar to the mother of that child. It was all about what the appearance was, making it small, not standing out, not losing face. There was lots of things around really being in the contained and proper body. And, you know, if you look at me, you can see how that worked out. So it's very interesting that where would that have come from? Like, that's been given to her by someone in her family, and everyone inherits that lineage of not enough. It never just happens from, you know, a place of, oh, we're going to crush this child. It happens from a place of intergenerational fear and shame. And, you know, I was just thinking when you were talking about that story, that shame is the sort of abrasive tool we take to the edges of the divine child, to sort of build it into that block that'll fit in society. And then we all wonder why we're so stressed and so looking for meaning and purpose when we just had to leave it on the stoop.
I love that term you just used then, the contained and proper body. That's so evocative and right. I strongly remember that too. I strongly remember being told to keep my knees together. You know, I wanted to wear cords, and I had 3 older brothers, so I was very boyish. And then when I got into a school dress, and be ladylike, put your legs together, and quieten down. So
what are people going to think? It's all, but that's that idea that it's what are other people going to think, because that's going to shame our whole family somehow. That, you know, if you're using the wrong milk jug, or you hold your fork the wrong way, like that's going to shame us all forever. And that's probably quite a big weight for a child to sort of be like, oh God, if I do this, you know, it's over. So I think it's interesting the language that your daughter's using in relation to, oh, that would be suicide. Like, I love the drama of the 13-year-old, but to even have those words that you would contemplate that sentence in its full meaning because of a social transgression that wasn't allowing you to be who you are. Like, I mean, you know, of course, tragically, we've seen that play out in real life over and over because of the pressure of the peers. So it's really, you know, this is, if we want to sort of unravel what we see in the world and the craziness of it, we don't have to go too far. Like, we've got to go really back to, they're the conditions we set up for the child to grow up in. No wonder we have a world full of people who are separate, alone, fighting, you know, scrapping over territory, not loving, not connecting, all that stuff. Like, we're trying to undo something that we need to start when they're like 0 or before.
I completely agree. And I'm always very moved when we're facilitating, Paul, and people talk to us about, you know, having this work persona and this home persona. And this conversation around their loneliness comes up. And I think, you know, isn't it extraordinary that we feel that if we put on a front and we behave in this professional way, that we're ever going to feel met and seen, because it's impossible. Putting on a shield, isn't it? And holding that there. And this comes back to your beautiful idea around belonging to self, that if we can't find our way to that love, to that confidence, to that wisdom, and to that bravery, I think, to inoculate the shame that we were all given as children in a myriad of different ways, then we're actually we're creating a prison around ourselves, and we stay separate from. And so when people ask us, well, you know, I don't like my team, and I don't feel a sense of belonging here, and how do I change that? my strong first stop with that is turn up for yourself first.
Yeah.
And then how do you integrate that into your work? How do you start turning up in an integrated way for yourself? What were you going to say?
I was going to say without being an academic wanker, and of course that precursor means, you know what it means, I am an academic wanker.
It means I'm excited. It means I want to talk.
But Foucault had that idea of the Panopticon, like society as the Panopticon, which was a prison that was able to see 360 degrees of you, and that originally the prisons, the physical prisons, were built like that so people could be observed all the time. There was no privacy, there was no way to get away. And his sort of concept was that sort of the way that our social fabric and our social institutions had been built was that we were scrutinized all the time in this sort of, so we were in this panoptical prison of our own making because we were constantly worried about what people were thinking about us. Now, he was writing that in the 70s and the sort of late 60s, way before social media, way before there was anything around what we actually have created for ourselves, which is the deeply embodied, it's not even an invisible panopticon now, it's like the reality of that we are both being observed and contributing to this external view of ourselves and feeding that fire. It's like, yes, you want to see me look like this, here's another image, here's another way that I'm conforming, so you can tick that box and I can feel that I am a good and proper person in the eyes of whatever fad it is to be at that time. So I think that's really interesting. And I do need to say that like the belonging to myself wasn't necessarily my idea, but I'll take it. But it's an interesting thing too. And I often, it's that for everyone who's ever walked into a networking event where they've had that moment of walking in and that sense that, oh God, like, and you're looking around at the people chatting and sort of just knowing there's going to be that moment where you're going to have to walk up to a group and then sort of try and artificially instigate instant belonging for a moment. I think there is that sense of who am I in this room that I can just stand here and belong to myself. Like I feel like that's the sort of feeling for me of that, oh God, and what am I thinking that I have to do? Whereas why am I kind of going, just the emanation of who you are, that essence of who you are, that's what you just bring. And that should just fit in anywhere. And it shouldn't be like, well, I hang out with these business people, but not these people. Or I'm in this sporting team, but not that team. I don't know. It's one I'm working on all the time in relation to just thinking about thinking about what do they think? Well, what does the clean and proper body have to look like? And going to, what is the essence? What is the essence I bring to you and I give you in authenticity and with open arms? I'm giving you this thing that I am, this divinity, and whatever your reaction to that is doesn't diminish it or turn that light down. It just is what is.
And also when you bring up a really important point, and I know we talk about this a lot, but it's none of our business what other people's opinion of us is. And this idea of trying to guess what they're going to think and then maneuver around, that is a zero-sum game. That's an insanity. And it's also based in the ego, isn't it? It's just all about me. So I find it, I love hearing you talk about your process of when you're networking events, because people out there, this will not surprise you to hear, you've never seen anyone in your life that makes it look more natural, more charming, more funny, more gorgeous than Polly does. I mean, I move in her wake and I feel like Gollum, and people are hugging her and it happens so quickly, and it's such an art that you bring. And I've watched it and I've studied it. And what you do is you bring your humanity and you bring play. That's the other thing you do, where you're just, right, I'm going to bring it. I'm going to turn up. Whereas I tend to recede and go into something that my husband refers to hotel ice face, which you'll be surprised doesn't bring a lot of hugs and a lot of laughter. But as I've got older, I've stopped spending time on the, oh God, I hate this. I hate small talk. I'm dying. I could be at home in my bed reading a book, and gone to, I'm here to meet some people. I'm here to meet them. So I'm going to bring my gentle curiosity, and I don't need to do anything else in the space other than that and place my attention on somebody else. And then beauty always arises, always.
And I'm a terrible networker. Like I don't mean that in a kind of, oh, I'm a terrible networker, you need to tell me I'm better, because I find it a really strange kind of concept, and I've never been good at it because I'm really interested in people's depth. I'm not really interested in kind of the surface. So for me, I want to stand with one person for an hour and just fully like engage and connect. But I think it really shifted for me when I stopped, and that absolutely came with age, when I stopped turning up to network and have a transaction. And I started turning up, as you say, just with curiosity and not feeling like I had to walk away with a pile of business cards or anything. I didn't have to do anything other than hold one truth, which was that there was a reason I was going to be in that room, and I was going to have a connection with someone that was going to be meaningful in some way. And so that sort of gets you off the hook. But I think, a lot of people who aren't really diehard extroverts quite struggle with that idea of networking. And I believe it is from that transactional nature of it. I also think it's different to what it used to be. It was just lots of people in suits kind of hanging out. I think we do it in a different way these days, which well, I hope we do. But yeah, it's definitely a thing. But there's something really great as well, and this another sort of Eckhart Tolle sort of piece around when you bring someone your whole focus and you bring them your whole attention, it moves something inside of them. It changes the shape of who they are, because we're so rarely ever seen or heard fully. We're never in presence. So someone will come up to you and they'll be like, "What do you do?" I.e., what can I get from you? What can I give you? It's like there's all this thinking going on, rather than just like turning up to the sort of, what being is this in front of me?
Absolutely. I love that. I love that about Eckhart. And I think about it a lot when I'm interacting, say, back in the day when we used to go to restaurants.
What is this thing you speak of?
What is this past life, where you take a moment to, and having done a lot of waitressing myself, but take a moment, that moment where you have a soul touch with a person. And it really just takes a small moment. And I remember the exact moment I learnt that. So standing on a subway platform when I was 12 in the UK, and there was a man on the train and I was waiting for the next one. And we made eye contact and there was nothing sexual, nothing creepy going on. It was just this moment of, I see you, you see me, we see each other. And look, I didn't have his phone number, I couldn't talk about it, but I still feel like here's my great friend who's gone off into the world. Just holding eye contact with him for it's probably less than 10 seconds. But this, like there was an energy source that came from us seeing each other, and it made me feel whole. And I remember thinking, oh, you can do this with your eyes. You can.
Zoe, sorry, I want you to talk about the eye contact work that you often bring into our facilitation, because I think that's so important to this, and some of the reactions people have, because you really opened my eyes to what a powerful thing this is.
Well, so we try and wedge in, and I try and wedge in, and Polly is always allowing me to wedge anything in because she's gorgeous. Eye contact into almost any workshop that we do around to get our thumbs in, and let's have a think about what we do with our eyes, and how do we offer our gaze, and do we offer it in generosity, or do we use it as a masking agent and a withholding agent? And what is it to actively look at another person? And why is it important to look at other people? And how does it feel when we're looked at ourselves? And we do beautiful exercises, which, I hope all of you have had the experience to do, where we get people to sit together and just look each other in the face for 10 seconds, just with neutral expression. And it's really interesting. Often we'll get people to do that without framing it up, how very hard they find that. And then if you frame it up from a place of generosity, that you're not wanting anything from them, you're just in connection with them, or framing it up where you're just going to project joy at that other person, then we see the most incredible things. Actually, the hair on my arms has just stood up just talking about it. We see the most beautiful things happen in the room, don't we, Polly, where people cry and they laugh and they say, I don't know when I last looked at another person. And then people go, my God, it's so intimate. Yes, it is. And it comes back to that beautiful Brene teaching that, the first thing I want to see in you is your vulnerability, but it's the very last thing I want to give. But that is what is required for connection.
What surprises me when we've heard the comments from that, and I'm surprised every time, is that people, they so often express how little they do it, and they talk about the conscious removing of the gaze. And so if our eyes are the window to the soul, and when we offer them to someone, we offer them our truth. And the thing with your eyes, you can do a lot of shit to your face, but you can't do anything to your eyeballs. You can really, to look into someone's eyes is to really go into a different place. And that idea that I'm withholding that from you because it's where I can have power, or it's where I can reclaim some space back in the world, or because I feel too vulnerable and it feels too risky. I mean, I've heard people say that a number of times. It feels too risky to give you that, which is just, again, it shocks me at how much and how many of us are walking around in these brittle caves because we just don't want people to see who we are. And we're frightened about, I think we're frightened of them turning away, and we're frightened about them seeing us and that we're not enough, and they're going to know we're not enough. But yeah, it's really, it's beautiful, but I find that sad because there's nothing more beautiful than connecting with someone through gaze.
Absolutely.
Just in everyday life, as you say, on a train, in a lift, whatever.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And I think I know, because I see it in our rooms, we forget about our eye contact. And that's saying, I want to see the whites of their eyes. It's meaningful. The reason we don't just send emails to each other, the reason we have meetings face to face, is there is a transaction that happens. And look into this, Google it, because the studies are absolutely riveting about what happens in our brains when we make eye contact. But I do want to touch on one thing, and I know we're talking about belonging, and eye contact is a fundamental part of that, is that I do think this issue is a bit gendered as well, where we hear over and over again, and this has been true for me too, where I will be less generous with my eye contact with men because I either feel unsafe or I feel that it is going to be read as a flirtation. And what a lot of assumption for me to make there. So now I have to do I'm going to be brave. I'm going to be brave. And actually, if they get the wrong end of the stick here, I'm going to be able to deal with that with a whole lot of other skills. But I'm not going to jump in and cauterize a connection to safeguard myself, to protect myself, which is actually another way of just saying, making my life very small. And I have another example of this. Is last year, I read this amazing book, Polly's read it too, called Women, Men and the Whole Damn Thing by David Lazer. And then I was at an event with him. He was on the other side of the room, and I was watching him because I was interested. I was interested in watching the man that had written this book about the Me Too movement, and I just love this book so much. And he obviously could sense that I was looking at him, and he looked at me, and I looked away because I instantly thought, oh, you've invaded his privacy. And then I thought, no, you haven't. You're looking at him because you're interested in him. I lifted my gaze and he was still looking at me. And then he sort of went like this. And then I waved. And then he waved. And now we've become friends. This gorgeous friendship thing has happened just through eye contact, and he didn't assume that I was a sociopath. I don't think he did. Anyway.
But the interesting part of that too is that if you think about that whole conversation around the intimacy and stuff, so if all of us are withdrawing our gaze all of the time and finding other places to look, the moment of connection must feel so unusual, and you can understand how it's mistaken. And I mean, I'm not making excuses for any appalling behavior, but you can understand how when someone actually gives you that gift of full presence and the window to their soul, it would feel like something was there. And I mean, if you also subscribe to the theory that I do, where we've all got connections, and we've got intergenerational connections and interlife connections, that suddenly we see that part of ourselves which sits there day to day quietly. And it would be quite shocking. And I think for a lot of people, we don't know how to handle that, because intimacy has to be contextualized in a relationship or in sexuality or in whatever it is, rather than just sharing a warm moment of intimate connection. And I don't think it's very frequent that can happen. And I think it can happen across genders. You can have an incredibly saucy eye contact with someone that doesn't have any fulfillment required. It's just, I see you. And what I see is I see you. And that's something I feel wow about. And I love that as much as anything else. It's kind of like, oh yeah, in the world.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that we feel that has to somehow be shameful. I mean, I think there's shame in that.
Yeah.
Rather than just going, hot diggity, like, look at the world full of these delicious, gorgeous humans. And why don't we do this more? Why don't we be like lapping that up more?
I completely agree. And I think it comes back to the same thing that we keep saying over and over again. What if you allow yourself to look, allow yourself to see, bring your curiosity rather than your fear? I'm not going to make eye contact because I don't want A, B, C, and D to happen.
That I've just made up because I don't actually know.
Yeah, I don't know, but this, what, this makes me feel safer. And then, I do see a correlation between those in our rooms that talk about really struggling with eye contact and talking about loneliness. And that's opinion. I don't know the theory around that. And of course, where you are on the introvert, ambivert, extrovert spectrum, there's something in that. But this is one of the reasons that I adore being with children, particularly little children, because there's no self-consciousness, no ego around the gaze. And so the drinking in, the drinking in and when I pick up my son from nursery, the little dudes that I've not met, if they're interested in having some eye contact, they come straight in through my eyes and have a walk around, and it's so nourishing and gorgeous. It makes me feel alive.
But kids really get that. Like, I have a great joy of sort of when I'm out and about in the world, and particularly like if I'm just shopping at a supermarket or something, when I see toddlers and babies and stuff, and you sort of do and they're like,
it's so true.
And like, it's a completely wordless conversation. You see them and you're like, I see you there, little dude. Yeah, I see you. And I'm like, I love you. You're pretty cool. Like, yeah, I know. I see you. And I just kind of like having that moment, because there isn't the self-consciousness, there's the curiousness, and you can be really playful, and they get it without words. They get that we're just all in this big jumble together.
Yeah.
And that stops at a certain age, but it's really like, I love that. And I love the sort of intense staring you get from kitties and from babies. And I often feel like there's some transmission that's going on that I don't really know about, but I want more of it,
Yeah, it's
not so much that I'd have a child, just to be clear.
Yeah, but don't worry, I've had them all for you.
Staring at someone else's child.
Yeah, I hear you. So I think it's so interesting to think about belonging and what we do to get it. And the question that I find really fascinating is, are the things that we do to get it, do they serve us, or do they do the exact opposite? And I know when I get active on belonging, when I start efforting on belonging, it's like some fable. It becomes illusory, like it slips through my fingers. That saying, of course, to be in connection does require effort sometimes, to reach out. But eye contact, it's a beautiful gift to give. And the other thing I've started doing in the last couple of years is really looking at old people on the street and in cafes and so on, and invariably a gorgeous connection happens. And I want that in my life, because I don't have enough old people in my life and in my children's life. And it's so interesting that they seem to have this knowledge of, oh, well, I'm invisible so much, and you see me, and let's talk.
I think for me, really, that there's a core sadness that when I think about that people so activate the stories around loneliness, and because of not belonging, without that sense of that we can find it inside. Again, it's easy to say, it's harder to do, but I think that for me, the quest is going to be in that space where I belong nowhere. I'm really so present to that at the moment, and thinking about the spaces I'm in and the people I'm around, and what does it feel like? I try and sort of feel into my body what it is to belong nowhere, but to belong everywhere, and just every piece of ground I'm in, every person I'm with, we all belong. But it's not tied to a place or an ego or an identity. And that's magical. I love that. I love having I love having the world where I can think like that, and I can just go out and bumble around and be like, oh, not belonging anywhere. So it's a real thing. But I also recognize the terrible pain of the sense of being held outside of the truth, or held outside of your essence. And I think the most horrific thing for humans is lack of connection, but it's actually lack of someone seeing who you really are. Like, that is the saddest tragedy of all. So my encouragement is that we all look at people into their eyes, not at what they're wearing or their hair or what we think they're going to do or what we're going to say, but actually spend time now. Here's your homework from this video, is to go and look at people and see their essence. Look for the essence. And the essence isn't going to have a name or a gender or a hair color or an eye color or anything. The essence is going to be the perception of that whole human. So beautiful. Looking at you, Zoe.
I'm looking at you.
Looking at all of you.
Yeah, I'm looking at all of you too.
I love you all.
Yeah, me too. Hey, thanks for being with us. If you belong here with us.
You belong with us.
Yeah, so thanks for being in our gang. If you want to write to us, have a riff about something, disagree, contribute, tell an anecdote, we'd love to hear from you. www.pilotlight.co. And we'll see you soon, buddies. And now I think for the rest of the day, you're going to feel kind of self-conscious about your eye contact.
Yeah. Good. Do it. Do the staring in the mirror thing. That's also horrifically. It's hard, but it's worth it. But thanks for trying.
Yeah. And thank you for joining us today. And we will see you next time.
See you in the next video.